fans threw bottles and smashed windows. Some 40 vehicles were vandalised, 2 were set alight. The violent clashes led to 40 arrests in the square, with nearly 160 in other parts of London. The Metropolitan Police said they'd given fans a great deal of leeway, but that some had overstepped the mark.
We had a single traffic patrol officer putting out some traffic cones, and suddenly he's subjected to a bombardment of bottles, etc. And then they started breaking down the barriers that were there, and we had to push them back onto the square.
But people in the crowd said the police had been too heavy-handed.
Police all surrounded them, and then 5 minutes later they were all charging in. I'd accept a few idiots might have thrown your plastic bottle. If they'd have just stood there and ignored everything, there wouldn't have been any trouble at all.
Broken glass and debris this morning bore testimony to the night's violence. The Prime Minister said that although the numbers involved had been small, they did great harm to football's reputation.
That demonstration was not remotely in the spirit of the whole tournament. It wasn't remotely in the spirit of the way the England team had played, and it wasn't remotely in the spirit of the sportsmanship that we actually saw on the pitch at Wembley last night. These people should not besmirch soccer. They are not soccer supporters. They do damage to soccer.
There were also smaller disturbances in Bedford, where 33 people were arrested, and in Bradford, Nottingham, Birmingham and Luton. And in a park in East Sussex, a Russian teenager was stabbed 5 times after 2 youths asked if he was German. The 17-year-old, who's studying here, is now in a serious but stable condition. He was due to return to Russia today. Rita Chakrabarti, BBC News.
Terry Venables has faced the press for the last time as England coach. He said he wouldn't have changed anything about last night's match except the result. He praised Gareth Southgate, whose missed penalty lost England a place in the Euro '96 final. It emerged today that John Major gave Southgate his own words of encouragement last night. He's reported to have embraced him and told him he was a great player with a great career ahead of him.
England checked out of the team hotel 3 days earlier than planned and without the trophy they wanted to win for the nation. To a man, they chose to come back here after the match to console each other rather than go straight home from Wembley. All thoughts were for Gareth Southgate, the player picked on by the fates to miss the vital penalty. With so many games ending in individual anguish, many are calling on football's governing bodies to come up with a better way of deciding matches. As it is, someone's always going to have to face the morning after feeling like Gareth Southgate.
It's a big hurt for him because he feels he's let people down, and he hasn't, of course. He's been man enough to stand up and be counted. What doesn't destroy you completely only makes you stronger, and he'll find that. I said to him, he's got a week to cry and he's got to get back in the game again.
While Terry Venables starts a new life as the ex-England coach, football will reflect on his legacy and the team's readiness for the next World Cup campaign. He believes the young players brought into the squad, the likes of the Neville brothers and Jamie Redknapp, are the future for England. Venables himself has got them playing in more thoughtful and sophisticated style, and in the 4-1 demolition of Holland, they produced England's most memorable night for 30 years. Glenn Hoddle is the inheritor as the new coach. He shares many of the same views on the game and will already have in mind the first World Cup qualifier against Moldova at the beginning of September.
See ya, bye.
Mr. Venables, meanwhile, leaves to spend more time with his lawyers and consider coaching offers from clubs and other countries. He wouldn't have changed anything, he says, certainly not the new spirit of togetherness among the players, which may be English football's best hope for the future. Neil Bennett, BBC News, at the England headquarters.
In a ruling that could affect 500,000 families, the Court of Appeal has said that councils must
I persuaded Tony Blair to take a different line along with my Scottish colleagues.
What hasn't changed, said Labour, is the promise to legislate for a Scottish Parliament within the first year of government, and they believe the new strategy has dramatically wrong-footed their opponents.
They were telling us that they were committed to a tax-raising Parliament. Now they're telling us that they're committed to having a referendum to decide what their policy should be. That is a retreat.
It was fun.
of the SNP will be the response of many people in Scotland, disgust at the U-turn that the Labour Party is doing even before a general election and under the pressure that they've been getting from the Conservatives.
Tony Blair will answer some of those charges when he visits Scotland tomorrow. He was in London today presenting awards to budding young politicians and hoping to convince all of his party that he's on the right track.
By giving people a say on this constitutional change, then it will be clear before the parliamentary process is ever embarked upon that they've consented to it, and it puts us in a stronger position.
But not everyone is convinced. One of Labour's Scottish team is expected to resign. Others are equally irate.
A blunder because it has split the Labour Party and our allies in Scotland right down the middle for no discernible political advantage that I can see, and every possible political disadvantage.
What Labour desperately wants to avoid is a repeat of '79, when the referendum campaign prompted poisonous infighting, not just in Scotland, but in Wales too. This time they say it will be different.
The campaign will be led personally by Tony Blair and every member of the government, and I'm confident the whole of the Labour Party will be united in persuading the people of Wales to support those proposals.
But for Labour's opponents, even those who support greater devolution, not even a new promise of proportional representation was enough to allay their fears.
Tony Blair's latest appeasement of South East England voters shows just how little Wales can trust New Labour.
What Labour has done today is to change, fundamentally, the terms of the debate on devolution. It is a U-turn, prompted in part by a very effective Conservative campaign. But its result now means that the Tories have to find new ways of undermining Labour's policy. Hugh Edwards, BBC News, Glasgow.
The Ministry of Agriculture has ordered that a widely used garden pesticide be withdrawn from sale. Officials say that a routine review has shown that Rose Clear can cause severe irritation to the skin and eyes. They've banned it from being sold, advertised or used and say it should only be stored until December. Gardeners are being advised to contact the manufacturer, Zeneca Agrochemicals, about how to dispose of Rose Clear.
A hospital in Norfolk is re-examining more than 8,000 cervical smear tests, which may have been wrongly diagnosed. The tests were carried out at the James Paget Hospital near Great Yarmouth over the last 3 years. A member of the hospital's screening staff has been suspended and an independent inquiry has begun.
President Clinton has called for the world's leading countries to adopt a 40-point programme to combat international terrorism. He was speaking as the bodies of the American victims of Tuesday's bombing in Saudi Arabia were being flown home. Mr. Clinton is in France for the G7 summit of the world's leading industrial nations. From Lyon, our political editor, Robin Oakley, reports.
Welcome today to the walled town of Perouge, liberated from the Nazis in 1944 by US troops and French resistance fighters. President Bill Clinton called for a new alliance among G7 leaders to fight the international menace of terrorism. He developed the message after a meeting with Britain's Prime Minister.
Terrorism is a problem from which no one can hide and on which we must all cooperate. And you've had terrorism in the United Kingdom, you've had terrorism in the United States, had this awful attack in Iran, you've had the problem in the Tokyo subway. This is the security challenge of the 21st century, I'm afraid, and we have to get after it.
President Jacques Chirac sees it the same way. Officials have been working on 40 different proposals to pool information, tighten border controls, and tackle terrorist financing crime. And a leader's declaration is expected after their dinner tonight. Mr. Major did the rounds of a Lyon shopping centre to promote British goods, taking the chance to get behind the wheel of the new Rover MG. He too wants more than mere words on terrorism.
The outrages at Dhahran and the outrage at Manchester, where only good fortune prevented many people being killed, means that's an issue we must address. We began to address it after the Sharm el-Sheikh summit, and I'd like to carry it further.
Summit sessions tomorrow will discuss the job insecurity that global markets have helped to cause. There'll be help with their debts for the poorest countries, but the political focus on terrorism will save the leaders from maintaining the pretense that these economic summits are any longer about global economic coordination. Robin Oakley, BBC News, Lyon.
And the time is 6:14 and still to come, a stadium fit for heroes. How Wembley might look in the 21st century.
the legacy of the Somme, clearing away the debris of the First World War.
And Tim Henman goes through to the third round as the British battle it out at Wimbledon.
Only hours after England's exit from the European Championship, plans for a massive redevelopment of Wembley Stadium have been unveiled. Under the proposals, much of the 73-year-old arena would be rebuilt and the famous Twin Towers moved to create a new gateway. But Manchester also wants to build a new national stadium and is competing for more than £100 million from the lottery.
Wembley this morning was empty and eerily clean. But Sir Norman Foster, one of Britain's superstar architects, has plans to dig up the sacred turf and relay it in a new stadium. The new pitch will run north to south, not east to west, as at present, with a retractable roof for pop concerts. Outside, the trademark Twin Towers will be moved 200 metres north to become the entrance to a huge new square surrounding the stadium, whose black glass walls will double as giant television screens on match days.
I think it will have all the drama, the atmosphere, the excitement that you associate with the present stadium, which is very tangible. I mean, last night was incredible. But it will have that even more so, because the sight lines at the moment, which are interrupted by the conversion to make seats and the columns, is very unsatisfactory. So the angle of the stadium will be more dramatic, which brings you closer to the action.
Wembley's showing its age. Its first cup final was in 1923, when a lone policeman on a white horse cleared the pitch after an invasion. The next year it played host to the Empire Exhibition.
The world at peace, there is no war, and train is backing up once more, and what's more down at Wembley.
Now Manchester has rival plans for a national stadium to house the Commonwealth Games in 2002. Like Wembley, it's bidding for support from the National Lottery. A decision's likely in October. There's no guarantee that Wembley's plans will get lottery money. If they don't, the old stadium, with all its shortcomings and its memories, may have to soldier on into the next millennium. Nick Hyam, BBC News at Wembley.
Postal workers have started their second 24-hour strike over pay and conditions. It's expected to halt almost all deliveries tomorrow, but the union has suspended further strikes to allow more time for negotiations.
The banners are out again, but there is progress of a sort.